What if World War I never happened? Imagine a world where the Great War, the war that shattered empires, redrew maps, and scarred a generation, never happened. No trenches, no mustard gas, no armistice, no Versailles Treaty. It sounds peaceful. But would it really be a better world? Or just a different kind of chaos? World War I was more than a war. It was the catalyst for the modern world. Over 16 million people died. Four empires collapsed. Borders were redrawn, ideologies were born, and seeds were planted for even darker decades to come. But what if it never happened? What if Archduke Franz Ferdinand had never been assassinated in Sarajevo? What if diplomacy, not bullets, ruled the day? In this alternate reality, the events of June 28, 1914 unfold differently. Perhaps the assassin fails. Or maybe Franz Ferdinand's motorcade never takes that wrong turn. Either way, the spark that ignited the war is extinguished before it begins. Without that flashpoint, Europe, tense and complicated as it was, manages to avoid global conflict, at least temporarily. So what changes? For starters, over 60 million soldiers never mobilize. Entire cities in France and Belgium aren't reduced to rubble. Generations of young men aren't slaughtered in muddy fields. Without trench warfare, the psychological scars that shaped a century of literature, art, and culture don't form. The lost generation isn't lost, but peace doesn't mean paradise. The Austro-Hungarian Empire continues its slow decline, holding together a patchwork of ethnicities and languages through fragile diplomacy. Internal strife still brews, especially in the Balkans. Nationalist uprisings remain a threat, but instead of being accelerated by war, these tensions play out in slower, more political ways. The German Empire remains intact, ruled by Kaiser Wilhelm II. Its industrial and military ambitions continue, but without the humiliation of defeat and the harsh penalties of the Treaty of Versailles. Germany may become Europe's dominant power economically and diplomatically, shaping the continent through trade and influence rather than force. Russia stays under Tsarist rule for a while. The revolution that birthed the Soviet Union was deeply tied to the chaos of World War I. Without it, Lenin remains in exile, the Bolsheviks stay fringe, and the Tsar limps on. But social unrest, economic inequality, and political repression don't disappear. A revolution could still come, just at a different time, in a different form, and perhaps with a different outcome. The Ottoman Empire avoids its collapse and the carving up of its territory by colonial powers. The Middle East as we know it, Sykes-Picot, artificial borders, foreign mandates, never materializes. Instead, the region may evolve under Ottoman control or gradually move toward local governance on its own terms. This could prevent decades of instability or simply change its form. And what about Britain and France? They retain their global empires, still dominating parts of Africa and Asia. Without the massive financial and human cost of war, decolonization movements may be delayed. However, the push for independence doesn't vanish. India, for example, still faces economic hardship and inequality. Gandhi still returns from South Africa. Resistance still grows. But without the weakened British Empire that emerged after WWII and WWII, the road to independence may be longer and more violently suppressed. In Asia, Japan remains ambitious. It had already begun expanding its empire by the early 1900s. Without World War I to distract Western powers or embolden Japan through territorial gains, its rise may be more cautious but still inevitable. Korea is already annexed. Manchuria may still fall. But without a global conflict to reshape alliances, resistance to Japanese expansion might come earlier and more united. The United States, which entered World War I late, likely remains more isolated. Without a major global war, America stays inward-focused longer, but its economic power continues to grow. The industrial boom, mass production, and consumer culture still flourish in the 1920s. However, without the war-driven spending and debt, the causes and timing of the Great Depression may shift dramatically. Would it still happen? Maybe, but its severity and global impact might be lessened. And then there's Hitler. Without World War I, He's just an angry, unknown young man in Austria. No military experience, no political stage, no wounded national pride to exploit, no Nazi party, no Third Reich, no Holocaust. The ripple effects are enormous. Millions of lives never lost. Cities never bombed. Nations never occupied. Europe avoids its darkest hours. But would another war still come? Possibly. Power vacuums don't last forever. Rivalries continue. Resources are still contested. And nationalism doesn't vanish. But any future conflict would likely be smaller in scale, or shaped by entirely different actors. A Cold War might still occur, but not between the US and Soviet Union. Perhaps it's Germany and Britain, or the US and Japan. The ideological battle between capitalism and communism may be replaced by old-fashioned imperial competition. Technology advances at a different pace. War drives innovation. Without WWII, airplanes remain primitive for longer. Tanks aren't developed. Antibiotics aren't mass-produced. Computers, radar, nuclear energy, all delayed. But without war's destruction, science might also thrive in peacetime. Education continues uninterrupted. Research flourishes. Progress may be slower, but steadier. Culturally, the absence of war trauma changes everything. The roaring 20s become even louder. The arts explode with confidence, not despair. Literature isn't obsessed with meaninglessness and death, but perhaps with optimism and discovery. The jazz age thrives. Modernism still comes, but takes a different shape. Women's roles evolve differently too. In our timeline, women entered the workforce during WWII and gained political momentum. Without that push, suffrage movements may slow down. But social change doesn't stop. The industrial economy still needs labor. Urbanization still reshapes society. Feminist progress might be delayed, but not denied. So where does that leave us? A world without World War I is not a utopia. Empires linger. Colonialism holds on longer. Political reform slows. But genocide on a continental scale never occurs. No global depression spiraling from war debt. No Second World War. No mushroom clouds. No Iron Curtain. It's a world with its own problems, its own injustices, revolutions, and tragedies. But perhaps it's a world where humanity had more time to evolve. Politically, socially, technologically, without the bootprint of total war crushing everything beneath it. One bullet in Sarajevo didn't just kill a man, it killed an era, and it gave birth to the most violent century in human history. What if that bullet missed? This might be the world that never was. Thanks for watching MightBe. If you enjoyed this dive into alternate history, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because sometimes asking what if is the first step to understanding what was.